5% said they had had extramarital affairs. But only 4% of the women who received Height survey had mailed in their responses. And these women may well have been motivated to reply because they were unhappy, making the sample hopelessly biased. When the same questions that Cher Height asked were posed to a sample of women who were randomly selected, the results were very different. According to a survey by ABC News and the Washington Post, 93% said they were satisfied with their relationships, and only 7% reported having affairs. So beware of science-coded journalism, where numbers are used to convey the aura of science, but the methods used to collect them are flawed. And while we're at it, let's beware of pseudo-scientific technology as well. This is a polygraph test, better known as a lie detector test. Every year, over 2 million Americans take one. But does it work? Psychologist Leonard Sax of Boston University is an expert on the use and misuse of polygraphs.
Unfortunately, hundreds of thousands, millions of people are subjected to these tests. It determines whether they get jobs, it determines whether they go to jail, it determines whether they get custody of their children, it determines whether they can work in the most important positions in our government, in the most sensitive positions in our government. And the problem is that the test doesn't work. It's not a valid test. It can be defeated. It can be wrong.
Is today May 26th?
Yes. The instrument that's used as a polygraph measures some very simple measures of what's called autonomic arousal. Person's heart rate, person's sweating, and the rate of breathing.
No. The tester asks a number of control questions where the subject is assumed to tell the truth. The subject's arousal is then compared to his arousal in response to relevant questions where he may be lying.
Have you ever taken something that didn't belong to you before?
No. People who lie are sometimes nervous, and sometimes their heart goes faster, and sometimes they sweat more. But it's also true that people who are just concerned about an issue show the same reactions. Vice versa, it's also true that people who lie sometimes don't sweat, don't have their heart racing, and so there's no direct connection, and there's no unequivocal connection between lying and these physiological states of arousal.
Recently, Congress asked Sax and his colleagues to test the validity of lie detectors. Sax set up an experiment where subjects were allowed to take money from a desk drawer. They were then given a lie detector test. If they could pass the test, they could keep the money.
No.
Do you have any money with you right now that you have taken from the desk?
No.
Some subjects were told that any lie detector can be deceived. Others were told that this lie detector was always accurate. The results were clear. Those who believed that the polygraph test did not work were able to deceive it. Those who believed it worked were for the most part caught, and some innocent subjects failed the test.
No.
A polygraph is a prop. It's a theatrical device, if you will. If a polygrapher can convince the subject, and they're very good at convincing people, if they can convince the subject that the test works, if the subject is guilty, they're going to be nervous. They're going to think that they can be detected. If, on the other hand, the subject knows that this is just theater, that the polygrapher can't really tell what they're thinking, they're not going to be afraid. They're not going to be nervous about being caught.
Clearly, getting at the truth is a difficult proposition. But fortunately, there are a few guidelines we can follow to avoid the most common pitfalls. First, find out who the subjects were in any study, how many of them participated, and how they were selected. Avoid the assumption that two things that go together are cause and effect. Correlation is not necessarily causation. Remember that seeing isn't believing if important information might be kept from you. Question any data that aren't collected using the rigorous procedures of the scientific method. any conclusion about human behavior is only as good as the data on which it is based. Keep in mind the power of placebos to alter reality. Restrain your enthusiasm for scientific breakthroughs until the results have been replicated by other researchers. And above all, beware of people claiming absolute truth and simple solutions for the many uncertainties and complexities of human nature. Scientific conclusions are always tentative, never absolute, and open to change should better data come along. In our next program, we're going to use our critical thinking to explore the very core of psychology, the brain. It's the biological base of all our actions, thoughts, and feelings. It's the hardware that controls the most noble deeds of the most advanced species on Earth and the most primitive instincts of the simplest animals. The brain and behavior. Next time on Discovering Psychology. I'm Philip Zimbardo.
Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg CPB to advance excellent teaching. For information about this and other Annenberg CPB programs, call 1-800-LEARNER and visit us at www.learner.org.
This is PBS.